All of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I'm going to talk about my favorite inmate. I got to tell you, I like the inmate thing. I like the number. My favorite inmate, 45343. Formerly known as Paul Manafort. Going to talk about what happened to him today. Also, more on the chaos coming from the White House. Lots of insanity there. But first, got to start with one of these stories that just I can't help but think what kind of revolution would have been started had Barack Obama come out with this memo, had the U.S. Navy come out with this memo on all of the internment camps they were going to be setting up. And I'm sure you've already seen this story that's broken, that there's memo out there that was prepared for and drafted for the Secretary of the Navy's approval. It is going, through a number of states going, how can we set up temporary and austere tent cities, because we're going to house a bunch of criminals. We're going and look, you can go, maybe we need to be able to have detention facilities for people who are coming here and are bad hombres or bad dudes or rapists. They're not all that. But I started looking at, and what's freaking me out is you start looking at, just where they're going and what they're doing and how much they're using the military into this, and the fact that the Navy is the one setting up these temporary and austere tent camps, or tent cities as they're calling them, is kind of freaking me out. The fact that they were going to have facility for 25,000 people at one of the Navy yards in Mobile, Alabama. They're going to have, this memo talks about another one for as many as 47,000 people at the former Navy weapons station, Concord near San Francisco. Another at Camp Pendleton could house another 47,000 people. And then they also say that, they're looking into, more in Yuma, Arizona, and how many more you could come up with, who knows, undeterminate number. And you stop and you think about this, you go, okay, who are those camps set up for? And I got to be honest, I start thinking about, how a right-winger would have thought if this memo would have come out during the Obama years. What would my T-Twizzler friends be saying right now? And you know where they would go. They're going to come and get us. They're going to come and round up all of the non-supporters. And this is where, my mind went today as I'm thinking this through. I'm going, they're talking about, you remember all those military bases that we shut down? You had the BRAC commissions going around shutting down all these military bases. Well, most of those are abandoned. We could fire them right back up right lickety split and turn them not into military bases, but prison camps. And I had joked several days ago about putting Joe Arpaio in charge of all this. It appears that quite possibly he could be a viable candidate to run our prison network of tent cities on our closed down military bases. And you begin to let the wheels spin. And as you know, because I've had these conversations with T-Twizzlers over the years about how Obama's going to come and snatch everybody's guns, and Obama's going to come and, everybody who doesn't agree with him, they're going to snatch up and they'll be disappeared. And you listen to the Alex Joneses, the conspiracy tinfoil hat twits, and it's, where are they now? Where it's actually happening. It could actually happen under this administration. And I hate thinking that way. I didn't like George W. Bush at all. I thought Cheney was the Antichrist. But at least in that moment in time, the joke had been all the time, you get out of line, they're going to send you to Guantanamo Bay. And maybe they would have. Maybe they would have snatched you up and taken you to a black site in Romania or who knows where. But not right here. Not the audacity to say, what, we're just going to set up tent cities all over the place. And we'll just lock people up. I was never a big fan of H.W. Bush. The only 2 times I've ever lost a job, been laid off a job, there was a Bush in the White House. But I never really got the feeling that George H.W. Bush was going to disappear everybody, even though, yes, I know he was the head of the CIA and all of that and could quite possibly have been doing that all along. You just never got the sense that could actually happen. And we were a different country at both of those points. We were much different during the Bush 2 years, and we were certainly a different country during the Bush 1 years. I don't know that we would have stood for this in either of those periods. And I guarantee without question that had a Democratic president suggested doing this, the Republicans would be, grab the guns. We're going to water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants and patriots. And yet, it was barely a blip on the news that I saw. It was a story that went by, and I'm going, to me, this is one of those really scary moments where everything that you fear about this administration, all of the authoritarian tendencies, all of the fascist mentalities, all of the melding of corporate and government functions, and who's going to run this? What for-profit company is going to make tons of money off of it? And then because again, if you're going to have these tent colonies and you're going to have it run by a for-profit company, they're going to want them filled. So who do we fill them with? And, someone had tweeted to me today, one of these things of, Fox News doesn't care about the people on the border and all of this stuff. And I tweeted back, I said, well, if they were white suburban kids, then they would care. So how many of our black and brown friends are going to be just swept away, disappeared? Is that going to start happening? Should we worry about that? Should we be, telling a friend, hey, I'm going, if I'm not back in an hour, send a search party? Is this where we're going to have to start going? And look, I know it sounds just absurd and it sounds completely off the rocker, but this is who we've got leading this administration. This is the kind of stuff that just, it's frightening on so many levels. And you had Trump out today saying, those people down there, they're not better than us. And again, I have a really hard time following his words. The thought process and the moment that it bangs around between the ears and actually comes out between his lips is just a weird moment. But he said, I always hear that, oh no, the population is safer than the people that live in the country. You've heard that, fellas, right? You've heard that. I hear that so much. I say is that possible? And the answer is it's not true. You hear it is like they are better people than what we have, than our citizens. It's not true. What he's talking about is, undocumented people in this country commit crimes at a much lower rate than citizens do. And that stands to reason that you don't want to draw attention to yourself. So you hide in the shadows. You don't do things that are going to draw attention to you. Like, I don't know, break the law. So just from a common sense point of view, if I were somewhere where I shouldn't be, I wouldn't want to be raising any flags of the people around me. As my grandfather always told me, if you're going to break the law, only break one law at a time. Because you might have a chance of talking your way out of it. It was his logic, actually probably not bad logic. Like if you're going to drink and drive, don't speed. If you're going to speed, don't have all kinds of paraphernalia in the car. Whatever you're going to do, don't do two things. And look, if you're here in an undocumented fashion, you don't want to draw attention to yourself. So of course, and it doesn't mean that they're better or worse or anything. It just means that they don't do things to draw attention to themselves. So, I look at that statement and I go, I don't understand what bangs between his ears. And what it is it's purely his belief structure. He has access to unlimited amounts of opportunity for information. He could actually get the facts, but that takes work. It's easy just to spew. It's easy just to whatever I decide the fact today is, that's what the fact is going to be. And what's weird is there's a segment of this population in this country that just regurgitates anything that spews from between his lips. I spent a little time watching the videos of people from Duluth, and it's remarkable at how, I don't want to say forgiving. I would like to say stupid, but I'm not going to go that far. Brainwashed, quite possibly. But just how far some of these folks really are off the beaten path. Especially the woman who was crying, uncontrollably that people don't like Donald Trump and he's just working so hard. And I go, you know what he does? He's the hardest working president in history. He causes more chaos and more divisiveness and more destruction than I think anybody else. And I think it's because he's got a base of, people who doesn't matter what he does. He literally could shoot somebody and get away with it. He literally could do anything. Look at the tax scheme. We're literally stealing food out of the mouths of children to give tax cuts to the wealthy and corporations, while simultaneously increasing our debt and our deficit. And not a peep out of any of those people who were, get your government hands off my health care. Nothing. I mean, it's really, truly remarkable to me. But I guess this is the moment in history that we are living, and it gives me a whole new perspective. I mean, I remember reading, the book, It Can't Happen Here, where, the German people were like, we didn't know what happened. It just happened. And you go, how could you be so silly? How could you be so stupid? How could you not know? How could you not see this coming? How could you go along with a murderous dictator? How can you go along with that? And I go, how can we go along with what this administration's doing? Look at these camps they're talking about setting up. But it's for the others. Don't worry about yourself. I say worry, and worry a lot. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Andrea Chalupa is going to be here to share some of her thoughts on what's going on the news of the day. Also, on 4534, otherwise known as Paul Manafort. Quick break. Right back.
Some of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1999. That was the day 5,000 textile workers at 6 Fieldcrest Cannon Mills in North Carolina began voting for representation by the Union of Needle Trades, Industrial and Textile Employees, better known as UNITE. The victory, later validated by the NLRB, was a significant win for labor in the anti-union South. The union's organizing director, Bruce Rauner, stated, quote, "It feels like we just organized GM. Suddenly, we've got a beacon to show other textile workers that they can do it." Labor historian Leon Fink noted that, quote, "It's a stunning victory for the union. It's the biggest breakthrough in a traditional Southern industry for probably the last quarter century." Then AFL-CIO President John Sweeney remarked that it was the largest union victory in a Southern textile mill in history. The election and victory came after 25 years of struggle and 4 previous attempts to organize at Fieldcrest Cannon Mills. Many noted that the young immigrant workforce made the difference. Conditions had been worsening at the mills. Workers, fed up with production line speed up, punitive decreases in piecework premiums, and company harassment, were compelled to vote union. One worker stated that he and many others were sick of lies management told to keep workers from voting yes in previous elections. Supervisors routinely intimidated workers to vote no with promises of higher wages, or when that failed, threats of deportation. Workers were barraged with various forms of anti-union propaganda. They found anti-union videos mailed to their homes. Some were paid extra to distribute Vote No t-shirts on the shop floor. The company finally recognized the union and negotiated a first contract that guaranteed higher wages, pensions, and other benefits.
If you inject a stream of raw ignorance into a vat of gaseous arrogance, then jolt the mixture with 1,000 megawatts of malevolence, what does it produce? Answer: Donald Trump's executive order of April 12th. King Donald I has been in a deep pout over negative articles about him in the Washington Post newspaper, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, king of the Amazon.com empire. King Trump fired off several rounds of angry tweets assailing King Bezos, including a potshot claiming that Amazon is, quote, ripping off the post office by underpaying for the millions of its packages the Postal Service ships. Tweets aside, Trump has the firepower of the federal government at his fingertips, so he's now arrogantly using the government to escalate his personal spat with Bezos. By executive order, he set up a federal task force to conduct a pernicious political inquisition into, quote, our money-losing post office, particularly looking at the, quote, pricing of the package delivery market. This reflects Trump's vast ignorance. Far from being a money loser, the U.S. Postal Service has actually been earning about $1 billion a year in profit. His false claim of unsustainable postal losses stems from a 2006 political ploy by right-wingers who want to destroy the public service. They passed a law dictating that USPS pre-fund retiree health benefits 75 years into the future, covering benefit costs for workers who haven't even been born, much less hired and retired. This adds a totally hokey expense of up to $5 billion a year to the USPS corporate ledger, creating the fake loss Trump is now so bombastically citing as the rationale for his destructive inquisition. This is Jim Hightower saying, sometimes public policy inadvertently turns bad, but when it's based on ignorance and arrogance, policy inevitably goes bad.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Since a prehistoric ages, and the days of ancient Greece, walked down to the Middle Ages, planet Earth kept going through changes, and then the Renaissance came, and times continue to change. Nothing stayed the same, but they were always renegades, like you said, Bull, Tom Paine, and Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they were renegades of their time. And
So, a federal judge in Washington, D.C. Refused 45 343's plea to dismiss the money laundering count against him. So, in Washington, D.C., that will go forward. And look, he's got charges in Washington and in Virginia. There's no getting around. Manafort will stand trial. The question is will he flip and save his own skin? That's one of those things where you go, going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because there's so much that this guy's been involved with over the years that once they start digging, once they start actually looking into the things this guy's gotten away with, it doesn't matter what happens with Trump at this point. This isn't even about him. This is about, the focus is now on 45, 343. And he's done a ton of underhanded stuff. And we've heard charges, allegations anywhere from, election tampering to murder, and everything in between and back and forth. And it's just, his failure to comply with, just simple things that he should have been doing, like the Foreign Agent Registration Act, because he did lobby on behalf of the pro-Russian Ukrainian political party there. So good. That's, in my view, very good. And he's still going to be sitting as a guest of the state at the Gray Bar Hotel. I'm very happy about that as well. Also, the big story today, Tom Arnold and Michael Cohen evidently teaming up for a photograph. And the talk of maybe Cohen's coming around. I'm still curious why he's not somewhere. And if I were him, I wouldn't be walking near any open windows. And there was an interview today with Tom Arnold that I thought was kind of interesting. And he was going, look, there's all these tapes out there of Trump, during his apprentice days and all of just the nonsense and all of the stuff that goes on. And I'm going, I don't think anyone cared. I don't think any of his supporters would care. And the more of this stuff that you bring out, the more that they're going to defend him. I think we're at this moment right now. I think we're at a moment right here where everyone who knows what he is and is disgusted by it are already on the side of get him out. And those people who've turned their head and are looking in a different direction, they're not going to come around. And I don't think you ever get them. So like I say all the time, they're fives. Move along. Just let them go. Move along. That simple. Hillary Clinton had a quote banging around today that I thought was important, because everyone keeps, all of my anti sanity crowd, the pro-Trump people, always keep coming back to, well, there's nothing there. The Russian stuff is all just made up, and there's no collusion, there's no vote tampering, none of that stuff. Hillary said that Vladimir Putin has positioned himself as the leader of an authoritarian white supremacist and xenophobic movement that wants to break up the EU, weaken America's traditional alliances, and undermine democracy. She went on to say at Trinity College, Dublin, that we can see this authoritarian movement rippling out of the Kremlin, reaching across Europe and beyond. She said it's emboldening right-wing nationalists, separatists, racists, and even neo-Nazis. We are living through an era when fundamental rights, civic virtue, even facts and reason are under assault like never before. And you go, whoever wrote that, spot on. This is the world that we're living in. And at the end of it, it's Putin who's going to be the guy who comes out smiling on all this. Because think about it. Think about what we've allowed to happen with this administration. They've ticked off all of our friends. We're actually starting a trade war with our friends, with our allies, with people that we have somewhat near some kind of balance. We're tearing those things apart. And could we tweak some things with them? Certainly. But starting a trade war with them is kind of a bad idea, especially when it's China who's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And I'm sorry, the $50 billion in tariffs that we slapped on them is peanuts. And all these people who are running around screaming, oh, you're going to raise the costs of everything. And this is, I was talking with Scott Paul, the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, the other day. And he said, you know what $50 billion represents in this economy? He said it represents a rounding error. You're talking about a $19 trillion economy. $50 billion in a $19 trillion economy is a drop in the bucket. It really is. And if it can make you have the ability to save some of your manufacturing, if it can work in a way that it's going to open up the Chinese markets and allow American imports to flow into China to where you have some balanced trade, that is a good thing. But starting these fires with people who are our allies, who we should be getting to go, hey, we need to be joining together and holding China accountable. Because look, everybody agrees they're manipulating their currency, right? Top to bottom. Everyone agrees on that. They're also agreeing that their markets aren't open to everybody. And they practice, oh, heaven forbid, protectionism. And they heavily subsidize industries that they target as what they want to take over. So you look at their China 2025 plan, this plan that's going to go after, aerospace technology and robotics and information technology and computer information and, all of this, the jobs that are supposed to be those high-paying jobs of the 21st century, they're targeting to take over for themselves. And look, it's smart policy. If we're allowing them to eat our lunch, if we develop a technology that they then swipe and retro engineer and figure out how to beat us with, shame on us for allowing it to happen. And you can go through industry after industry where this has happened over the last couple of decades. And without something happening, I'm sorry, it's going to get worse. But we're not really taking on the Chinese. There's just chaos everywhere. And Putin's got to be sitting back going, man, this is working out better than I would have ever imagined it could have. Because we're fighting amongst ourselves. We're fighting amongst our allies. Our country is in the middle of an ideological civil war. And we're pitting neighbors against neighbors, family members against family members. I can't tell you how many times I read a Facebook post of, well, if you don't like what I said, and you can unfriend me, and you go, that's not how debate works. And I look at it from the Putin perspective, mission accomplished. And it does all come back to this kind of nationalistic fervor that they're starting. And the Russians understand us better than we understand ourselves. They understand that that's the undercurrent in this country. That's always been that original sin of 3/5 a person in the Constitution. That's always been the undercurrent in our politics. It's always been something that's been a flare point in our society. And they've taken advantage of it. And they've taken advantage of it, as well as you can. I mean, it's really just remarkable. And what you end up with is you end up with chaos. And you end up in a situation where there are no truths. There are no facts. You can't believe anything. I go back to the coat. Do you really think that Melania with the coat, the I don't care, do you? I don't really care, do you coat? Do you really think that was a message about the quote unquote fake media? Because if you remember, her spokesperson said it doesn't mean anything. It meant nothing. So then why did you wear it? And even that, you can't agree to go, it's wrong. I had this weird conversation back and forth with an uncle of mine. We went back and forth over email for about an hour. He sent me an email, like a chain email about Michael Flynn. And, he was a hero and spent 34 years in the military. And, this is Obama's doing. And Obama, took him down. And it got me to thinking that, I used to view him as someone who, at least on a certain level, had a a strong intellect, was a critical thinker, but the whole brainwashing of this country, especially, you know, someone he's in his 70s, especially that demographic. So we had this back and forth where, you know, we're talking about Mike Flynn, and I go, you know, truth of the matter is, you know, he pled guilty. So what's your argument? How did Obama force him to plead guilty? How is that possible? So let me start going back and forth into some other things. And it's, you know, because he's a big anti-abortion person. In fact, at one point, you know, I remember, you know, a conversation a couple of years ago where he was imitating holding a baby and tears coming out of his eyes, that, you know, he cared about abortion that much. And, you know, oh, the tiny babies, and, oh, how much we love the babies. And I go, well, that's great. But the problem is you don't like any of the kids. You refuse to support those kids once they're born. And this, and I threw that back up and I said, this, what we're seeing happening right now, right before our very eyes, highlights the fact that you guys don't give a rat's behind about these kids or any kids. And I think that was highlighted in the fact that you had Brian Kilmeade, who in my view is someone, probably should be one of the most slappable people on the planet right now. I'm sure he was a lunch money victim as a kid. That can only be the rationale here. But he said this, and it's one of those things that just, he said, the other thing is that I think the biggest joke is that we're not addressing. It wasn't President Trump's idea to have everyone leave from Central and South America in June, as well as up at the border. Someone has to deal with this issue. It doesn't matter who the president is. If you don't like his policy, he's open to your policy rather than just criticizing his. Really, I don't see any willingness to be open about any policy out of this administration, Brian. So stop lying to the people that are watching him. He goes on. He's trying to send a message to other countries. This is not the way you do it, because this is a country that has laws and rules. The port of entry will be one thing. We can bolster those laws, but we just can't let everyone in who wants to be here. Then he hits on the money shot. And these are not, like it or not, these are not our kids. Show them compassion, he said, but it's not like he is doing this to people of Idaho or Texas. These are people from another country, and now people are saying that they're more important than the people in our country who are paying taxes and who have needs as well. I don't quite know where he got that from. And there's a couple of right-wing myths that they keep throwing out, that people want to swing the doors open and that these kids are more important than quote-unquote our kids. Ludicrous, bold-faced lie, absolute nonsense, completely wrong. But again, it's Fox News, so all of that stuff applies to virtually every word uttered out of their mouths. But to actually come out and say, well, they're not our kids, you know, shows me again, the pro-life people are so full of it. Remember, these are God's children. And I don't quite know if, again, if you're going to use the religion as a shield against other things, if you're going to stake your flag in the ground and say, this is my flag, I don't know that you can use the whole God thing and then say, well, only our kids matter. And we can treat those people inhumanely, because Jesus would have done that. Most certainly. Just flat out crazy. And, it's one of those things that I'm struggling with. And I know that we've all had these conversations with aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and all of this. I know we've had these. And, this is where I was talking with my daughter today. And I said, look, I'm struggling because I used to give Republicans a pass. That, hey, there's some decent people. There's some decency among them. But if you voted for this guy and you still support him after all of this, I don't know that there's any help. I don't know that there's any way I can look at you with anything other than a jaundiced eye. and question your humanity and question your soul. I don't know that that's possible. Because I look at this and while, we can have differing opinions on what the right immigration policy is, the stories that I've been reading of having men and boys in cages packed in like sardines, standing for 24, 48 hours until they collapse simultaneously, caged in, and they're only being held up by being smashed into each other. It's not who we are. It really isn't. I'm sorry. I just cannot. I can't allow that to happen. And while you say, we have to have laws and we have to do these things, I'm right there with you. We've got to do something. This isn't it. This is wrong. This is idiotic. And it's not who we are. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. That was the day that the Cuyahoga River, which winds its way through Cleveland, Ohio, caught on fire. Cleveland was once the 6th largest city in the nation. During the early 20th century, the city had a booming steel industry. Clevelander John D. Rockefeller made the city a leader in oil refining. But after World War II, industries left strong union cities like Cleveland and Detroit. These jobs moved south and overseas, where wealthy industrialists could exploit workers in markets with weak labor protections. As a result, Cleveland fell on hard times. During the 1960s, the city lost 150,000 residents. As jobs left town, so did the workers. The once proud factories that lined the banks of the Cuyahoga River had brought jobs to the city, but they also pumped pollution into the waterway. When a passing train put off sparks, the river oozing with oil and debris caught fire. It was not the first time that the river ignited. Time magazine posted dramatic photos of the burning river, although the photos were actually from an earlier blaze. The pictures helped to fuel the growing environmental movement. They gave momentum to the passage of the Clean Water Act. The Cuyahoga was not the only urban river impacted by industry. The Time article described how, quote, Omaha's meatpackers filled the Missouri River with animal grease balls as big as oranges. Today, one of Cleveland's breweries sells a popular Burning River Pale Ale. The Burning River is part of the history and the folklore of the city.
Burn on, big river, burn on. Burn on, big river.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So someone losing their mind in the chat room, which is kind of funny. The suggestion is that we stop providing military protection for countries like Sweden. Evidently, the claim is that we protect 100%, which is not completely accurate. We do spend a bunch of money on our geopolitical strategic positionings, which is we're the defender of the world and we are the world's cop. And we could argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing from a security standpoint. Probably not a good thing for other countries, but for us, not bad. Also, problem, it does kind of make the rest of the world look at us as the world's cop. not a good thing. Now, what's interesting to me is the very people who would say, you know, we can't, we should make them pay for the military and all that, are the same ones who are saying that absolutely under no condition should we be giving foreign aid to any of these countries. And I've been saying for a while that, you know, the knee-jerk reactions from conservatives over foreign aid and earmarks, you know, pork barrel spending, all misguided, all reactionary, all idiotic, and causing a lot of our problems. You look at some of these countries that are struggling, especially when you look at working people. There aren't enough jobs. The gangs have taken over in places where government can no longer control, and you have chaos. And a lot of it has to do with us not intervening in some of that stuff and not creating an environment where people stay home. We used to do that. We used to do a lot of that. And this is the cause of a whole bunch of things, but a lot of it has to do with our economic policies globally. This austerity, this laissez-faire capitalism, the way corporate America goes into some of these third world countries and just rapes and pillages, just flat wrong. And you wonder why, when you have people who are starving and people who are struggling, why they go, hey, we got to go somewhere better. We got to make it to the next place. We got to get away from danger. And there isn't a person. I've yet to find a person who would say to me, if I were in Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, that I wouldn't be working my way right here. There isn't a person I've yet to find who wouldn't say that I want to find somewhere better. I want to make sure that my kids are secure and they're safe, that we have the ability to put food on the table. A quick reminder, understand what we did to Mexico when we passed NAFTA. They had to change their constitution and stripped land from communities that was supposed to be for community aid, for farming, to make sure that communities were fed. All that stuff got stripped away. And of course, handed out to the overlords and all of that. And I've always found it quite interesting that the very people who are saying, we got to stop foreign aid, are the same ones who are going, no, we can't have anyone here. Understand, the reason that we've always done the foreign aid thing is to make sure people stay at home. And the other thing that gets me is the pork belly, the earmarks, those earmarks, they're bad. That's how we used to get roads and bridges. That's how we used to get hospitals. And that's how we used to get schools and museums and parks. And you name what we needed, that's how we did it. And yes, sometimes you built a bridge to nowhere. But you know what then happened? That bridge to nowhere actually ended up somewhere. Because you invested in the future. And look, if we had we invested back during the Carter years in alternative energy the way we should have, we wouldn't even need fossil fuels by now. We haven't had the kind of investment in the future in this country to get us away from all of the stuff that's killing us. We haven't done it because politically, you've got too many entrenched interests and too much big money. Too much big money to spend on things like, oh, I don't know, internet ads, and oh, gee, I don't know, radio ads, and funding all of these laissez-faire capitalist kind of, you know, talkers who are saying, oh, no, we don't need unions, we don't need regulation, no, let the free market decide. And you go, where in time have we ever had a free market? We haven't. And yet we've been so well brainwashed. We've been so misguided. And you're always going to get one troll who's going to, you know, throw in his 2 cents because someone told him something and he thinks he knows now. And especially when you're talking about being on the internet. When the reality is, if you go back and you look at that period from the end of World War II up until Ronald Reagan, we had built the largest, most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. Prosperity was widely shared. Opportunity was abound. The American dream was built. Ronald Reagan to today, question. You know, most of the people I know, they're struggling to make it to next week. Families are being just stretched so thin because both parents have to work. The cost of college is going through the roof. The cost of sending kids to school is outrageous. And yet, what do we end up with? We end up with this kind of division where you get somebody who's going to be spewing off because they think they know something. And by the way, our cost of defending other countries, of having military presence in different areas so that, strategically, and we can argue whether we want to be the world's cop or not. What is for a reason, and that's our global superiority. Now, you can say we don't want to be, the world's superpower, and we don't. I had an argument the other day with somebody about the South China Sea. And you could say, fine, we'll pull back from it. But if you're not there, there will be a vacuum and someone will fill that. And then what happens to our friends, the Japanese? What happens to the South Koreans? What happens to that whole region? It's easy to spew. It's easy to spout. It's easy to, I got a thought. As my grandfather always said, maybe you've got the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Choose to use that. Kind of a thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The European Union will hold a major summit on migration on Sunday. It's an issue that's driven apart EU nations in recent years, with the likes of Germany and France trying to distribute refugees fairly across the EU's 28 nations, while others, particularly in the Balkans, Southern and Eastern Europe, push for more border restrictions and want to opt out of resettling refugees altogether. Under existing EU rules, migrants hoping to apply for asylum are supposed to do so in the first EU country they reach, which in most cases is Italy or Greece. When this rule, known as the Dublin Regulation, is applied, Italy and Greece feel they're being overburdened, and when it isn't followed, migrants often bypass southern Europe and head straight for the Netherlands, Belgium, or Germany, where they think there's a higher likelihood of gaining asylum or receiving other government services. And that's caused friction within Angela Merkel's fragile German coalition government, pitting her more patient approach aimed at convincing European states to share the refugee burden with the likes of her new interior minister who wants migrants deported back to the first EU country they arrived in. One German idea to break the impasse is to have African countries set up refugee processing centers within their borders, eliminating the need to embark on a perilous and often deadly journey across the Mediterranean to try and reach Europe in the first place. But German officials admitted Thursday no country had signed up to play that role. Instead, proposals more likely to win broad support, such as a Bulgarian plan to shut down Europe's external borders altogether, are starting to circulate and gather support. According to EU statistics, some 728,000 people applied for asylum across the EU in 2017, down from over 1 million people in each of the 2 previous years, but still close to all-time highs. Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1977. The eyes of the British labor movement were turned to the Grunwick Film Labor Processing Laboratories in northwest London. Members of trade unions participated in a large demonstration at the factory. Miners from as far away as South Wales traveled to show their solidarity. As police tried to bring in buses of scabs, the picketers and the police clashed. The bloody scenes played on television sets across the country. The workers at the plant had been on strike since late summer of 1976. They were demanding the right of union recognition. The majority of the workers were women from Southern Asia. The company intentionally hired these women in an effort to keep wages low. One striker explained, "Imagine how humiliating it was for us, particularly for older women, to be working and to overhear the employer say to a younger English girl, 'You don't want to come and work here, love? We won't be able to pay you the sort of wages that'll keep you here,' while we had to work there because we were trapped." The strike had started when a man was fired for working too slowly. A small group of his co-workers walked off the job in protest. From there, the strike grew, catching the attention of the broader British labor movement. This strike marked an important turning point, as British trade unionists supported a predominantly South Asian workforce. Earlier strikes by South Asian workers had not received similar support. Despite this show of solidarity, the company remained entrenched, battling vehemently against the recognition of the union. The women at the plant fought for 2 years, until the strike was called off. The end of the protracted battle was seen as a major blow to labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Highlight what I was talking about here a second ago. When you look at the end of World War II until 1980, I came across a bunch of statistics that, you just look at them and, again, facts don't lie. The numbers don't lie. You go from 1946 to 1980. The incomes of the top 1% rose by 47% during that time period. Now understand, during most of that time period, the top marginal tax rate for those making over about $1.6 million in today's dollars was 92%. 1953, it was 92%. Kennedy dropped it down to 70%. Once Reagan took office, it eventually went all the way down to 28%, which is what began our massive debts. When you took all the money out of the system, of course, you still had to provide roads and bridges and military. So at a time when Reagan was doing Star Wars and spending $1 trillion on a fantasy, we were giving away our tax base. So from 46 to 80, top 1% saw their incomes rise by 47%. The bottom 50%, where most of us would have been, saw their incomes grow by 102%. Let that sink in for a second. Their incomes grew by 102% for a reason. And that reason was strong unions who were saying, look, you corporations are making a boatload of money. We are the ones who supply the labor that creates the wealth that you're enjoying. We want a share of it. 1980, you have the election. 81 begins the supply side voodoo Reaganomics era. And August of 81, you have the firing of the Patco workers. Bang, shot heard across the boardroom. It's open season on labor unions. And culminating, with all of these years to today, on Monday, get ready for the Janus decision to come out of the Supreme Court. And as I said from the beginning, right back in February when they argued it, it will be one of the last things they throw out as they're running out of town, because it's going to be that bad of a decision. But you go from 1980 up until 2014, where the statistics ended. And what you saw was the top 1%, instead of seeing their incomes rise 47%, saw their income rise 204%. And you go, wow, that's fantastic. We got more rich people. And you go, okay, well, the sad reality is the people at the bottom 50%, who had seen during the World War II era up until Reagan, had seen their incomes go up 102%, saw just a 1% increase. From 1980 to 2014, they saw a 1% increase. That's not with economic gimmickry. There are no models. There are no calculators. There's none of that stuff. Dollar for dollar. And I tell this story all the time. Late 80s, early 90s. I was started off making $15 an hour, throwing boxes on a shipping dock, that with a wage that would have gone up, to 1870 something, I think, at the time, with health care, with pension, if you had enough hours. Today, very same job, exact job, $14 an hour, no benefits as a casual, top rate of $18 an hour, with much worse health care and a crummy health retirement plan. Where did all that wealth go? Well, we know it was redistributed from the working people, the people who create the wealth, to the 1%. And we just gave them more with a giant tax cut. And we did it in ways that were really just cruel. Because now we don't reward work, we're rewarding being your own independent contractor for the first time. And what has to happen, what has to come out of this at some point is that there's got to be almost a revolution. And this is where the Democrats, they've been trying, give them credit. They've been poorly trying. But I go back to the Obama era. There were 2 years right at the beginning of that Obama's term where a lot of this stuff could have gotten done and didn't. We could have in the moment of crisis, when people were losing their homes by the millions, people were losing their jobs by the millions, we could have given them the opportunity to join and form unions for the people who still had jobs so they wouldn't get screwed. Because you stop and look, and Emmanuel Saez does some, and Thomas Piketty they do some incredible work on this. Those first 2 years after the great collapse, those first 2 years, the top 1% took 122% of all new income gains. They took it all. None of it trickled down. In fact, they took it all plus some because they clawed wages back. And you stop and you look at what's happened in this country. Massive, massive redistribution of wealth. And that whole idea of having a reward for working, that whole idea of work hard, play by the rules, get ahead, completely crushed. Completely crushed. And somehow they've trained the working class of this country to tolerate it. I mean, that's the part that just, leaves me scratching my head. How is it possible you're willing to tolerate this kind of behavior? I'm literally sometimes dumbfounded. In that, I just had a conversation with a friend who told me that he's not well. He has some stomach problems, and he has to take medicine. And look, from what I understand, they're terrible problems. He told me today that the cost of his prescription drugs just doubled through his healthcare plan. And they hadn't told him that the cost was going to double. In fact, they wanted to try and claw back some of the past prescriptions. They wanted to go back retroactively and charge him the rest of what they thought he owed. And they're still trying, from what I understand. And I just, he's telling me about, this healthcare plan that he pays a ton of money for, and it covers very little. And it's not the Affordable Care Act. It's, he's buying private insurance and paying, just like $18,000, $20,000 a year. It's just outrageous. And he's saying, how did we get here? And I ask that question all the time. How did we get here? From a place where, my grandmother and grandfather, my grandfather with an 8th grade education, had the best health care money could buy. You walk in with a card, all taken care of. No forms to fill out, no harassment, no co-pays, no co-insurance, no deductibles, none of that stuff. How did we redistribute wealth in this country that lopsided that not only did they stagnate wages and actually make wages to go backwards, but also took back the benefits that people fought for? Actually got us thinking that we have to pay for the insurance. I mean, it's really amazing. I had people say to me that, those public sector workers, they don't have to pay for their health insurance. I have to pay for mine. Why should they? Why shouldn't they have to pay? Instead of going, hey, they get it for free. Why can't we get it? It's part of our compensation package. We work for that, damn it. It's ours. It's quite remarkable. Quite remarkable indeed. Just amazing stuff, though. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share, how are things for you? I mean, your healthcare great? Everybody I talk to, not so much. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Yeah, this one's for the workers who toil night and day, by hand and by brain, to earn your pay, who for centuries on past for no more than your brain.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com, so you know to highlight what we need to be doing. And look, as I said, the Democrats really need to get their act together. And one of my hopes is that when Democrats take back the House, they take back the Senate 2020, you take back the White House, we undo all of the horrible damage this administration has done, but also move forward on smart policy to, again, reward work, give workers the ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, and maybe, rebuild that prosperous working class that our grandparents and our great-grandparents built for us. And it starts with every election, and November matters. But in New York, next Tuesday, the primary election, and one of the races that I've been following is New York's 19th congressional district. And I've got one of the candidates, Brian Flynn, is a Democratic candidate for Congress there in New York's 19th district. Brian, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, so good to be here again. Thanks for having me on.
So I bet you can't wait for this to be over.
I was just telling someone tonight, because we were out knocking on doors and meeting with people until I just left an event around 9:45. And I said to someone, I am just so excited. Either we win, and it looks really good that we're going to win, or it's over. So either way, it's a good outcome.
Yeah, and I've been following that race because it's, to me, one of those, there's a lot of people involved. It's democracy in action, a lot of people with ideas, and, kind of you guys have been fighting it out. This is kind of what I think the founders really envisioned.
It's funny because someone said to me tonight, and I'm fighting against some establishment people. We've got some congressmen who have put people up to this race. We've got two candidates who are supported by the establishment congressmen from other districts, and then we have one candidate supported by the governor here in New York. And then there's me, and a guy I met tonight said, hey, this would be amazing. You are basically in a dead heat against all these establishment people, and you're just a guy from the side of the mountain in Greene County. And the people here, it was an event here locally, and they were just so excited that their guy, against all these forces, was right there in the fight. And the idea, and I like what you were talking about earlier, was that the idea that, a working guy, one of us, is out there trying to actually make a difference.
No, I mean, I've been saying for a very long time, they need more of us in the halls of power because I think, I honestly, truthfully believe our elected officials have gotten too far away from what it's like to have to worry about paying the mortgage, having to worry about, hey, if the kids get sick, will the bill bankrupt me? I think they've gotten way too far away from the rest of us.
Yeah, and you talk about it, which I thank you for. You actually point this out all the time. And what the idea was when the founders started was that you had citizens who would be legislators, people who had jobs and would make a career, and they were farmers or merchants or whatever, and then eventually they'd say, hey, I'm going to take some time out to go serve my country and be a member of Congress. What's happened now is it's become a career, and that concerns me because you don't have people who understand what it's like to struggle to pay their bills, struggle to worry about how they're either going to pay their employees or they're going to actually take care of their families. And if people don't have that perspective, I don't see how they can actually be an appropriate representative.
No, I'm with you. And at the end of this, it comes down to, who we get into those offices and the policies that they're pushing. So as you're out talking to people, and I've been following you, you're one of those people that just everywhere. Somebody told me you put over 100,000 miles on your car just in the last several months.
Yeah, it's funny. Our district is larger than our congressional district is larger than the states of Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. And what's great about it is that even though it's in New York, it's in upstate New York, and it feels more like the rest of the country than it feels like New York City. And we've been, it's 7 full counties and 4 partial counties here in this district. And we've been all over the place. We've done 400 campaign stops in 130 towns. And it's made a difference because what you hear out there, and here's good news, there are some things that are different in each of the areas, but there are some commonalities of things that we're hearing out there. We're hearing people are concerned about what's going on in the country. They're concerned they don't recognize the country anymore. They're concerned that both parties, and this is important, both parties don't appear to be paying attention to what normal working people are dealing with. And I think that's a big revelation for me, is that this isn't just a Democratic versus Republican thing. They feel as if people are out of touch for what's going on for working people. And what I was encouraged by is that people are opening to listening to anybody who comes up with real solutions. And that's what's actually made this thing invigorating for me.
No, and it's really important, and you know, I'm sure you get hit with issues all the time. And for me, one of the core, most important issues, as you know, I'm a union guy, so you know what we're going to see on Monday. At least I believe Monday is going to be our Supreme Court making a horrible, overturning, decided law. Going completely against their ideology, just so for political expedience, and deciding the Janus case. To me, this next Congress has got to be looking at how do you undo all the damage that has been done to labor over the years. And I know there's some people who've come up with the Workers' Freedom to Negotiate Act to push through and maybe undo Taft-Hartley and some of the horrible stuff there. If elected, where are you going to push on those issues, and what are you planning on doing?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's interesting. It's been 40 years that we've eviscerated the unions, and we have to also own a little bit of this as Democrats. We haven't paid enough attention to the union workers, and also specific policies that could have prevented the situation we're in now, because we're continuing to rely on the judicial system to actually arbitrate what is the best solution. The reality, the best solution is to have clear laws that clearly outline the rights of workers to organize, the rights of workers to collectively bargain, and that should be in law. It shouldn't be subject to the Supreme Court making a decision. It should be very clear in law, and that's what concerns me. We haven't done our job, and obviously it goes all the way back to the Employee Free Choice Act back in 2008, which was what we were going to pass should we have been able to prevail past 2010 and have a majority. But it's before 2008. You know that. It's the fact that we haven't done enough. Now we've gotten ourselves into such a situation that I think you're right. We're going to have to actually step forward and really take a big look from a legislative perspective. What is it that we could do to actually create a situation that enables unions to thrive rather than undermining them? And I got to tell you, it's not something that Democrats have talked enough about, and it's one of the reasons why in where I live here, a lot of union members don't vote for Democrats. Because what's the difference? We haven't been as supportive as we needed to be anyway.
But at the end of this, and I given some statistics a moment ago. You go through that, the end of World War II up until 1980, and you see that the wealth class, the top 1%, saw an increase in their pay of 47%, while the bottom 50%, they well over 100%. And you go from Reagan till 2014, and the 1% pocketing over 200%, while the bottom 50% are getting 1%. This massive redistribution of wealth, this uneven situation, has caused a lot of people who are rightfully angry. And I'm sure you talk to these people every day who they're struggling to make it to tomorrow. Let alone think about their kids' college or retirement or any of that stuff.
And the only people who I talk to who actually have any sort of retirement or plan are union members. It happened twice today. I was out knocking on doors. Obviously, we have election on Tuesday for the primaries, so you got to be knocking on doors all the time. And I was at one door for someone who was a transit worker, as part of the Transport Workers Union, and he was saying how tough it is right now. But he stopped and said, "But thank God, I've got great benefits and I've got a pension." And I'm thinking that's 10% of the population. Now, here in New York State, it's up to 25% of workers. Right. But then I go to another door later in the day. A woman had just retired from 40 years of teaching in the public school system. And she had such a great way about her because, one, she was so excited about being retired. It was actually her last day of school was today. And the only reason why she actually was so excited and she had such a life ahead of her was because of the pension that's being provided by her union membership. All the other workers, which in the country is around 90%, and in New York State it's around 80%, but everybody else has no plan. And what's happened is that we haven't done enough to actually not only enable union members, but overall enable us as a society to figure out a way to protect workers and provide opportunities for them to have long-term savings and plans. As you said, we've allowed the money to be taken from workers. And it's almost as if Republicans have forgotten how the economy works. The only way we grow the economy is to get the money out of the hands of capital and put it back in the hands of workers.
Right.
And you and I talked about this last time we were together. Henry Ford always said he wanted to make sure that his factory workers could buy his cars. And metaphorically, we're at the point now that we have no factory workers who can buy cars, and our economy is going to stall. And this is what happened in the 1920s when you concentrate all the wealth into a small percentage of the population. The economy stops moving, and it stops growing for those who need it most. And that's where we are today. And what they did, and you and I talked about it, what they did is all of a sudden they started saying, I got nothing to lose, I'm going to vote for Trump, because at least he says he's going to do something. And I think now we Democrats have been humbled, and I'm seeing it out there in the doors, and people say, okay, you guys learned your lesson, now let's talk what you're going to do for us.
And again, it comes back to a lot of those things that, we've been talking about, wages, hours, conditions, and healthcare. I mean, as I understand, I think you're the only guy who's a Medicare for All guy in the race. Is that true?
Well, right now there's like kind of three of us leading in the polls. So it's basically turned, there's 7 people running. It's turned into a 3-way race. And 2 of the other guys, this is shocking to me, 2 other guys running in a Democratic primary, and these are 2 guys being supported by the establishment. So they're taking a lot of their messaging from the TCCC or whatever. But 2 of the guys don't support Medicare for All. Now, I support Medicare for All for a lot of reasons. One, I support it because I believe healthcare is a right, not a privilege. I support it because it makes the most sense from a strictly economic perspective,
right,
irrespective of what you believe, if it's a right or a privilege. It just makes the most sense. It's going to enable us to have the more coverage for more people, get better health outcomes, and create jobs in our communities, rather than have the corrupt, inefficient system that we have today with employer-based healthcare that doesn't work. Right? So I understand the issue. These, 2 of my opponents, which just shocks me, say, well, I'm for universal coverage. People should be able to keep what they have. No, because that undermines Medicare for All. What it will do is create a 2-tier system where all of a sudden the healthy and the wealthy will continue to have one set of health care that, in fact, is being subsidized by taxpayers, and the rest of us will be ghettoized into some sort of Medicare for All, public option, whatever, and it won't work because you don't have a risk pool that incorporates all the healthy people as well. The only way we can do it is take the Band-Aid off, do Medicare for All, single payer, and that will enable everyone, including, most importantly, union workers will have higher take-home pay because their health care costs will be less. And I tell you, to be in a race, in a Democratic primary, in a very pretty progressive district, Democratic primary voters here are very progressive, that people are considering nominating somebody who doesn't support Medicare for All, for me says that people just don't realize how important this is to working people in our country.
I mean, to me, that should be the central issue in your race. I mean, the fact that they don't is mind blowing to me. But again, as you pointed out, some of the establishment, they're trying to hold on to what the ACA was. And look, the ACA was a good step, but to be honest, it's one of these things where we have given way too much to the pharmaceutical companies. These insurance companies are getting too fat and happy off of our dime. It's time to claw this back, have one single pool. It seems simple to me. And you as a business owner, I'm sure you didn't get into your business to fight over healthcare costs or figure out, how you're going to get healthcare for your employees.
It's amazing to me, and I've said this to people all the time, this is going to end up being, here's the great irony, this is going to end up being part of the Republican platform. Because they're going to say Medicare for All is going to enable us all to spend less on health care, get better health outcomes, and cover more people and create more jobs. And I said, you would have liked this, Rick. I had an interview the other day with a radio station was set up, and it was the interviewer was a Republican, and he hit me pretty hard on this. And he came at me and said, "Well, that sounds like socialized medicine." I said, "No, this is single payer. It has nothing to do with how we run hospitals or medical product companies. It is not socialized medicine." I said this is simply a way of paying for it that provides the best coverage and also the best outcomes. But the guy said, "Well, who's going to pay for it?" I said, "I got to tell you something." I said, "What I used to hear is you Republicans claimed, although you don't really deliver on this, but you claim to be fiscal conservatives. You guys like to spend less on things, right? That's your thing, right?" And the guy says, "Yeah, that's our thing." I said, "Great. So tell me, why do you choose to go with an employer-based health insurance system that is inefficient, corrupt, and ineffective, when if you move to my system, Medicare for all, you're going to spend 30% less. Are you guys no longer fiscally conservative? Can we now say we are the fiscally conservative ones because you guys have given up on it, and you're simply the corrupt ones who have sold out to the pharmaceutical? And the guy says, well, I didn't realize Medicare for all will cost less. And here's a great line, and I don't know if you and I talked about this, but everyone keeps saying Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all over the next 10 years is going to cost $30 trillion. And I believe it might cost $30 trillion in the next 10 years. I think that number might be pretty close. The current system will cost us $45 trillion over the next 10 years. So they're right. It will cost $30 trillion, which is 30% less than the current system that we're under, and will provide better health outcomes and better health insurance. That's how we have to sell this idea, and that's how, ironically, I believe this is going to end up being something the Republicans are going to jump on pretty soon.
Well, I hope so, because, look, it just makes sense to have one giant pool. I mean,
I know.
It's basic insurance. Have one giant risk pool where everybody's in, so you mitigate the risks at either end, because we already, as a society, we're already paying for the most expensive. We take children out and we take seniors out. We're already paying for the most expensive parts of healthcare, and the private industry gets to pick from the healthy people, and they get to exclude people, or soon they'll be able to go back and exclude people with pre-existing conditions. So they won't even be covering those somewhat sick people. So they'll only get to cherry pick the most profitable, and that's how the game's been rigged.
Yeah, it's amazing to me when I talk to people about this, and I say, so do you like have your employer involved in your health care? Now, granted, when people used to have more secure relationships with their employers and they felt like they might keep their jobs longer, maybe they'd say that's okay. But now everyone, or the majority of people I talk to, feel insecure about their jobs every day. So they say, well, you're right, I really would prefer not to have my employer involved in my health insurance. They never even think about it beforehand because it becomes so much a part of our culture. So I said, right, exactly. Employers should not be involved in your health insurance. You should be able to switch jobs because you want a better wage. And this will help increase wages because people will no longer be handcuffed to an employer because they're trying to get health benefits. It's ridiculous. Nobody else does this. And when I talk to Republicans about this, all of a sudden there's kind of this light, which is great, right? All of a sudden they say, hey, you're right. That doesn't make sense. Okay, good. We agree on this. Now let's talk about a path forward. And all of a sudden you start getting this conversation, which we are not that good at. We have to get better at selling people, bringing them into. I mean, you're good at it, honestly, Rick. You're good at actually bringing people into the fold and explaining to them why it makes sense. And if we could get more of you out there so people would say, hey, this makes the most sense, that's going to actually enable us to win on this issue in the fall.
No, it's important, and it is common sense. And the other part of it is, for those, especially Republicans who believe in the entrepreneurial spirit of the country, I know a lot of people who, throughout the years, they've wanted to put out their own shingle. But healthcare costs, and look, the ACA stuff, to be honest, is, it's okay. It's not great. We should be doing a lot better. And for people who want to put that shingle out and they want to give it a try to start their own business, that first step over that threshold, worrying about healthcare, is one of the most dangerous.
Exactly. No, and it's funny. Been self-employed many times, and throughout my career, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I've been a union member as well, just like a lot of freelancers or people who own businesses, plumbers, electricians. A lot of them, as small business owners, are members of unions as well. And it's amazing to me that the freedom that I was able to get because I had a union-provided health insurance. If I didn't have that, I would never have been able to create new opportunities, hang out my shingle, try new things. Everyone should have that. Why do we? Yep. It's amazing to me that in the land of America, which is supposed to be about entrepreneurialism, we keep restricting people, and because of this silly thing called health insurance. And it's amazing. I'm in a primary here, in a Democratic primary, and I've got two of my opponents, which is I'm flabbergasted every time I get on stage with them, that they support, and people are voting for them. And I've even had people say, well, we don't want to make this a litmus test. I'm like, actually,
no, we do.
Maybe I do.
No, we do.
Look, thank you, Rick.
I'm going to steal Melania's coat. I actually do care. Honestly, I care. This is one of those, to me, it's one of those kitchen table issues. And I know the Republicans love to talk about kitchen table issues. This is the issue. I don't think there is another one.
Thank you. Right. And to me, it's even black and white. Now, we've done the work. We put together a team of experts from here in our district who actually come from hospital administrators and small business owners, and a team in this district who came together, and we did Medicare for All town halls. And we went out and spoke to people throughout our congressional district, and we said to them, here's our plan. We analyzed all the different opportunities that were out there, and we said, here's what we think is going to work. And we gave a path forward, how we can make the transition as quickly as possible. And what was great is we were incorporating input from people. And I got to tell you, it is that binary to me. It's the most important issue. It's the largest part of our economy in every county in our district, except for one. It is also the largest cost for many of the people who live in our district. So it's both a job creator and also the biggest expense of people, including small business owners. Come on, people, this is something, and I'm glad to hear you say that, because to me it's like a woman's right to choose. I think it's becoming something that I believe is a binary thing and needs to be something where there is only one way forward that makes sense and actually frees up workers, provides the most for our country, and actually creates the most jobs.
No, I'm with you. And you brought up a woman's right to choose. They should be able to choose to get birth control with their health care plans and not have an employer who says, I have some religious problem with somebody else doing something else. It's insane to me. And another reason why it's get out of the hands of employers. Let me ask you a last line of questioning, because Tuesday's the big day. Is there anything people can do between now and Tuesday? Call neighbors, something, call people in your district. What can folks do? Do you have any setup to help?
Well, yeah, actually, the people have been doing that, and we have people. It is going to be an outreach thing, and it's going to be voter turnout. As the primary voters are so small, and we have in New York State, we have different primary dates for different, whether it's federal versus state. It's all about outreach. So, yeah, if you know anybody in the district, please help people get out to vote and help people to focus on workers' issues and focus on Medicare for all. And I think that will make the big difference right now.
Hopefully our listeners in Woodstock I think that's in your area, right?
It is, yeah, definitely.
Hopefully our listeners there will get out and vote, who listen on our station there. Make the pitch. You got 30 seconds. Why Brian Flynn?
Listen, right now, and this is important. Right now, our country is at the point we have to fix the problems that allowed Trump to happen. It's not about Trump. He's the result, not the cause. And we've got a plan. And I've talked to you about this. We've got a plan for the American worker. And it is about creating jobs and increasing wages, but it's also about removing the barriers that have kept people down, barriers that have undermined unions, barriers that lead to systemic racism and systemic gender discrimination, and the fact people don't have access to decent, affordable health care and education. Our plan addresses all those issues. And it starts with Medicare for all. It starts with supporting unions. It starts with funding and supporting public education and protecting our environment. If we just focus on those things, we will win. I come at this as someone who's been a union member, who's created jobs, and who's also been to Washington and got legislation passed. That's what we need in Congress right now. People who go down there are trying to do the right thing, not just win in the political game.
There you go. The best of luck to you on Tuesday. I hope you come out on the other side of this, and when it's over, I'd love to have you come back and give us the victory speech and where we go forward.
Rick, thank you for everything you do, and I look forward to it.
Brian, good stuff. If you want to check out his website, brianflynn.us is the site. We'll make sure we get it out so people can take a look at it and help out if you can. There's volunteer opportunities and all of that. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're the first ones to die, the first ones in line for that pie in the sky, and we're always alive when the crane is set out for the worker is working when the fat cats fall. We're the first ones to stop, we're the first ones to die.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1999. That was the day 5,000 textile workers at 6 Fieldcrest Cannon Mills in North Carolina began voting for representation by the Union of Needle Trades, Industrial, and Textile Employees, better known as UNITE. The victory, later validated by the NLRB, was a significant win for labor in the anti-union South. The union's organizing director, Bruce Rauner, stated, quote, "It feels like we just organized GM. Suddenly, we've got a beacon to show other textile workers that they can do it." Labor historian Leon Fink noted that, quote, "It's a stunning victory for the union. It's the biggest breakthrough in a traditional Southern industry for probably the last quarter century." Then AFL-CIO President John Sweeney remarked that it was the largest union victory in a Southern textile mill in history. The election and victory came after 25 years of struggle and 4 previous attempts to organize at Fieldcrest Cannon Mills. Many noted that the young immigrant workforce made the difference. Conditions had been worsening at the mills. Workers, fed up with production line speed up, punitive decreases in piecework premiums, and company harassment, were compelled to vote union. One worker stated that he and many others were sick of lies management told to keep workers from voting yes in previous elections. Supervisors routinely intimidated workers to vote no with promises of higher wages, or when that failed, threats of deportation. Workers were barraged with various forms of anti-union propaganda. They found anti-union videos mailed to their homes. Some were paid extra to distribute Vote No t-shirts on the shop floor. The company finally recognized the union and negotiated a first contract that guaranteed higher wages, pensions, and other benefits. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I got to tell you, I really like Brian Flynn. And the thing we didn't go into is his great uncle was the guy who founded, Mike Quinn was his name, founded the Transport Workers Union. And one of the iconic labor leaders in the history of this country. And he's just, Brian's just an average everyday guy. He started a small business, did fairly well for himself, has been one of those people that, is right on the issues. About health care, about the right to join and form unions and fight for better wages, hours, conditions, all of that stuff. And on the right side of where we need to be going as a country. He's a good, decent, honest, hardworking guy who, isn't so far away from the rest of us. And I keep coming back to that. I look at a lot of the politicians that we have, and I don't know that they've ever worried so much about, hey, if the kids get sick, will they be able to see a doctor? And if they do, if they fall off their bike and break their arm, is it going to bankrupt me? I mean, it's really one of those things where when you find somebody that you can identify with, the hope is the people of the 19th district there will come out and come out in droves for him, because it would be great to see folks like him. And others that we've talked to on the program throughout the country who are fighting these uphill fights against the establishment. Look, I'm not thrilled with the people that the DCCC has chosen in a lot of these races, and the big moneyed interests have chosen. This is why I think the vote matters, and the fact that you're seeing people all across this country running for these races. Like he said, I think he said there are 7 people in that race right now. And here a guy who didn't get the governor's endorsement or the establishment, party endorsement is running right there with him because he's out there doing the hard work, knocking on the doors, putting over 100,000 miles on his car in I think it was 15 months, he said, and being committed. And I got to be honest, to have that kind of commitment, I got to wonder if he needs to be committed, because that's an awful lot of work. But at the end of it, he's seen this. And, what he hit on there a second ago is something I've been saying for decades. Why is it that we have employer-based healthcare? It makes no sense. And I go back to the one guy sticks in my mind every time I talk about this. It was a guy we met when we were doing one of our Hungry and Homeless for the Holiday food drives. We were living in the parking lot of a local supermarket for 10 days. And this guy stayed with us the entire time. Because as he said to us, it's the only time he had felt safe in the last year when he was homeless. And this was a guy who had worked every day of his life, worked hard. Was actually a conservative Republican. Had a heart attack. 6 months he was out of work. He didn't have a union. He was an at-will employee. They sent him to the curb. Sorry, good luck, better luck next time. A couple of months later, healthcare is gone. No more coverage. So he's got no income, he's got no health care, and he's struggling from a whole host of medical ailments. Had a heart attack, and then he had a whole bunch of other things that went wrong. And I couldn't begin to list all of the problems that he had. So here he was, no job, no health care, no money, no place to live. He's basically homeless. So he basically indigent. He gets Medicaid, which, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars keeping him alive, only to send him out into the street. Eventually, he did get some VA help and a place to live before he died a couple of months later. But for that time period, this guy was homeless. And this was a guy who'd worked his entire life and worked very hard, only to have a system that said, well, you know what? You don't have a job. Sorry, no job, no health care. And it was, one of those moments that makes me go, it's just idiotic to have a system set up like this. And you think about the benefits that you could have from cradle to grave health care, like making sure that people get continual care and preventative care. And yet, we're still, I don't get it. And like Brian Flynn pointed out, it is a sound fiscally responsible thing to do. From a business, we pay twice as much as everybody else. From a business perspective, it's just smart numbers. It just is. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk to our good friend, Pennsylvania State Senator Art Haywood. He's got some ideas on maybe what we can do with the Donald as we move forward. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
They called it a public relations nightmare if released.
Blocked water study finally released reveals widespread chemical contamination.
Most of the food crops that we consume showed these nutrient reduction.
Increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere reduces the nutritional value of food. Plus,
the Earth is warmer in 1988 than at any time in the history of instrumental measurements.
It's been 30 years since Dr. James Hansen first warned Congress about climate change.
30 years and counting. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Scott Pruitt is trying to protect you from finding out water is bad. If it is, which it's not, because what study?
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, they've been hiding this study for a long, long time for some reason, and then they decided this week, with everything that's going on in the country, would be the week they release it, I guess.
Yeah, that widespread water contamination study had been blocked from public release by the Trump administration out of fear that it would cause, quote, a public relations nightmare. And for good reason. The Centers for Disease Control quietly published that study online on Wednesday, and it is not good. As predicted, the study shows dangerous toxic chemicals known as PFOA and PFAS used in nonstick pans and other consumer products are widespread in public water systems and military bases around the country, and the study found those chemicals are far more harmful at far lower levels than previously thought. The study recommends that the Environmental Protection Agency set the safe threshold for these chemicals up to 10 times lower than they are currently.
So when they were originally blocking this report, they said it would be a public relations nightmare, but they're releasing it on one of the craziest, busiest news weeks, and that's saying quite a bit, that we've seen in a long time. So will anybody actually notice this study?
Probably not. And it's also highly unlikely that any action will be taken by the Trump EPA to address any toxic chemicals in the U.S. water supply.
Well, that part goes without saying.
Well, this week the EPA faced a court-ordered deadline to propose new standards for chemical spills from industrial facilities. That was in the wake of a toxic coal ash spill into a West Virginia river back in 2014. The EPA on Wednesday published that regulatory proposal to regulate those chemicals and concluded that no new rules are needed.
Of course they did.
And President Trump this week rescinded President Obama's protections for the oceans and the Great Lakes that were put in place in the wake of the catastrophic 2010 BP oil disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. Trump's new executive order instead orders offshore oil and gas drilling to be prioritized and calls for more industrial development in and around the oceans and the Great Lakes.
He's calling for more industrial development around these precious resources.
Indeed, he is.
Okay.
Meanwhile, a disturbing first-of-its-kind study has troubling long-term implications for the global food supply. Published in the journal Nature, it finds that rising carbon dioxide emissions appear to reduce the nutritional value of food crops. More CO2 does make plants grow bigger, but it turns out that too much CO2 is like junk food for plants, increasing production of simple carbohydrates at the expense of essential nutrients like protein, zinc, iron, and vitamins in staple food crops like rice, corn, and wheat, which are primary food sources for billions of people around the world.
So those global warming deniers who said that, well, even if the globe is warming, this will be good because we'll grow more food, plants need carbon dioxide. Even if they are right about that aspect, they are wrong that somehow this makes everything better.
That's correct. Finally, June 23rd marks the 30th anniversary of the day that NASA scientist Dr. James Hansen first testified to Congress that rising CO2 emissions from the burning of fossil fuels was triggering dangerous global warming. Here's Dr. Hansen's original testimony back in 1988.
Our computer climate simulations indicate that the greenhouse effect is already large enough to begin to affect the probability of extreme events such as summer heat waves. Altogether, this evidence represents a very strong case, in my opinion, that the greenhouse effect has been detected and it is changing our climate now.
30 years and millions of dollars in fossil fuel industry-funded denial propaganda later, all of Hansen's predictions in 1988 have proven roughly accurate. In an interview with AP this week, Dr. Hansen said that he wishes he had been wrong. While some actions have been taken and the transition to renewable energy is gaining momentum globally, 30 years later, global warming's impacts are no longer in the future, they are now.
For much more on all of those reports and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The more you ignore me, the closer I get. You're wasting your time. The more you ignore me. Hey, Mr. Tangerine Man, build a wall for me. I'm not that bright and don't know that you're not going to.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. A new Ipsos poll out asked the question, is if it's appropriate to snatch kids from their parents, to snatch undocumented kids from their undocumented parents. 27% overall agreed that it was okay to snatch those kids away and throw them into pens. 56% disagreed. 46% of Republicans were all in favor of it, while 32% disagreed. Only 14% of Democrats agreed that it was a practice we should pursue, and 29% of independents. And the question is, what do you do with the Donald? Where do you go? How do we handle this? And is this right? Is this fair? That's why I've asked our good friend, Pennsylvania State Senator Art Haywood, to come talk with us. Art, thanks for taking time for us. How are you today?
Feeling? Doing well, doing very well. Can you hear me?
So what do you think of this poll?
Several things. I don't know if you saw a CNN poll that came out today that said the level of support for impeaching President Trump today is about the same as it was a few months before the action when Nixon resigned. What it showed was that 43% of the public supported impeaching Richard Nixon in March of 1974. A few months later, he resigned. Today, 42% of Americans are polled in favor of impeaching and removing President Trump. That's what I think.
So we're all in favor. So what can a state senator do? What can you do to move that along?
So what I have done is prepared and introduced a resolution in the Pennsylvania State Senate urging the state Senate to ask Congress to impeach the president. I know that the state Senate cannot impeach the president. However, we have often proposed resolutions encouraging Congress to do things we think should be done. There are several fundamental reasons why the president we have now should be impeached. Not just his cruel and immoral actions to separate migrant parents from their children. But in addition to that, there's ample evidence that the president has impeded and corrupted justice, both by firing FBI Director Comey, as well as asking Comey, as well as other officials, to let the investigation of Michael Flynn, then National Security Advisor, to let it go. I've got many other reasons, and I'm glad to go through as many of them as you have time for me to review.
Well, I think it's important that we have the conversation to be able to pick through some of this stuff. So give me your top one.
Number one is the attempt to corrupt and obstruct justice. This has been done in several ways. First, as I have said, the firing of Mr. Comey. Second, asking Comey and others to let the investigation of Michael Flynn go. Next, essentially requiring the firing of McGahey. Now, let me just say something about these attempts to obstruct justice. Many people have said to me, Special Prosecutor Mueller is still doing his investigation and he is not done. I respect that, but at the same time, we can't wait for all the crimes to be committed and discovered. Impeachment is the start of the congressional investigation. It is the start of an investigation that is impeachment. But it's not only the corruption and efforts to impede justice. We know that the president has taken money from foreign governments through his businesses. This compromises the integrity of the decisions of the president when an individual or a business or a country can influence him by making payments to enrich him. Third, which I think is almost as fundamental as the other two that I've mentioned, the president has been completely derelict in his duty to the American people by consistently lying to us, providing false and misleading statements. You know, the New York Times has already identified over 2,000 instances where the president has provided either false or misleading statements to the American public. Doesn't the president owe us something?
No, I agree. Absolutely.
So these are some of the most fundamental reasons why, A, he's abused his office by taking this money from foreign governments. He's been derelict in his duty by lying to the American public. And these are not policy issues. I don't have to agree with the president on his policy, whether it is the Muslim ban. I did not agree with that. But that's a policy difference. So there are a number of areas of policy difference I have with the president that are not grounds for impeachment. And I think we need to be clear about that difference.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We're having a bad connection. Let me get a call to you. All right? Because the connection's a little rough right here. It's one of those things that again. When you talk about impeachment, when you talk about, what's going on with this administration and just how obscene this has been, it's one of those things that's, to me, really, really frustrating. And look, I'm glad that there's finally somebody stepping forward and saying, this is where we need to go. I'm glad that there's a state senator out there saying, hey, we need to pursue this. We need to push on and make sure that there's a way for us to hold someone accountable and to allow these investigations to go forward and to really push into Again, holding them accountable for the actions. You look at what's going on the border. To me, it's one of those things that's just disgraceful. And by allowing them to get away with it is nuts, in my opinion. And it's something that we really need to, again, stay active, stay engaged, stay on top of, and to really, just kind of push through. And really, again, hold them accountable for. So, and look, I know that there are a lot of Democrats who are saying, well, we shouldn't be pushing for impeachment. This isn't something we want to talk about before an election. And I go, this is the exact time that when you need to be talking about this. We need to be pushing for some measure of accountability. It's the only way you're going to rein this administration back in. It's the only the way you're going to gain any control back over our process, and gain some respectability in our government. To me, it's just that simple. And we got Senator Haywood back on the line. Senator, thanks for getting back with us.
Sure.
As I've been saying, the reality is we need to hold this administration accountable. And if impeachment, just even having the talk about it is a way to do that, I think it's important that we do it.
I agree. I want you to know that there's a legislator in California, Mr. Lowe. He introduced a resolution in California calling for his state legislature to support asking Congress to impeach the president. He did it immediately after, or shortly after, firing FBI Director Comey. But I believe, this is the time to rebuke the president. We've got to push back. And you're 100% right with that. And so we have an online petition that individuals can sign to indicate that they are in support of impeaching the president. That online petition can be found at www.senatorhaywood.com. And I urge everyone to sign this petition. Now, I want to be clear. I am not saying that the state Senate can impeach the president.
Right.
Only the House of Representatives can do the investigation, and then the Senate does the trial. But we are citizens of this nation. We have a right to have our voices heard. And many of us believe that the president has gone beyond the line of decency, beyond the line of morality, beyond the line of what it means to be a president of the United States, which is corrupt behavior. And so it's entirely appropriate that I have this resolution in the Pennsylvania State Senate to build the demand to rebuke the president.
Well, let me ask you, Art, what brought you to this? I mean, you're a level-headed guy. I think you're one of our better state senators. What is it that made you wake up one day and go, you know what? I'm gonna do this. And maybe some people are gonna think I'm off the beaten path, but this is important. What was that? What was the thing that made you go, this is the way forward?
I believe I was not really a straw that broke the camel's back incident. There was an accumulation of the president attempting to move the democracy, in my opinion, more toward an authoritarian, more toward a demagoguery kind of rule. And one of the things that actually did affect me was when the president did a complete about-face with respect to what his denial that he had any engagement, any knowledge of the settlement agreement with Stormy Daniels. And because, as you know, he had his lawyers say for months, he knows nothing about it. He said he knew nothing about it. And then at the time convenient for him, he admitted that he knew everything about it. This is a kind of deep dishonesty that is inconsistent with anyone who's leading our nation. And that dishonesty at that moment just was another demonstration that we've got a leader who we cannot trust to tell us what's going on.
Right.
And if we have a leader of a nation that we cannot trust to tell us the truth, this nation is in trouble.
No, I'm with you. But, I look at the events of this past week, and look, the Stormy Daniels thing is one thing. I mean, the he said, she said stuff. I mean, we can go back and forth over that. I mean, this past week, if you had any doubts, I got to think that this past week is what solidified any doubts you may have had with the inhumane and cruel treatment of ripping children out of their parents' arms.
I did, but Rick, I got to tell you, I prepared the resolution the week before.
No, I know you did.
Now, this certainly solidified it. And here again, we had a president telling the American people he had no power to change the separation policy. Then, suddenly he wakes up and he has the power and he signs the executive order. This is the kind of dishonesty that's too much to ask the American people to manage. It's too much. And we've got to have a president that's honest, that we can believe in, even if we disagree with him. There's been many presidents that I've disagreed with, but I did not see a consistent pattern of dishonesty, which makes the whole nature of this administration so corrupt.
No, I'm with you. And the scary thing is, and I'm sure you see this, that he has his blind faith followers who, regardless of what he does or how cruel or inhumane his policies are, they're still standing right there.
That is a tremendous risk for the nation, to have individuals connected to this man who is becoming a demagogue. I think that's what he wants to be, is a demagogue. I have heard individuals in the Republican Party say that they are afraid that the party is being taken over by a cult of individuals that are following a demagogue who is a pathological liar. And so this threat has already been identified, not just by me, but by individuals in the Republican Party. I believe that Senator Bob Corker said he was very concerned about what appeared to be an emerging cult in the Republican Party following Donald Trump. And so we've got to nip this in the bud. Let me mention one other thing briefly related to the separation of the children. My daughter shared with me a document called The 10 Stages of Genocide. 10 Stages of Genocide. We were on the 7th stage of genocide. The 7th, not the 1st. I saw a statement by a lady who's a professor of German history, and when asked the question, are we is the American nation now at the beginning of where Nazism was when it started? She said, no, we're several stages beyond the beginning. We're several stages beyond the beginning of where Nazism began. And that was because what we have here is the president separating the immigrants from the rest of the people, calling them animals, vermin, infestation. These are all steps in the stages toward genocide that we are already on.
It's scary, scary stuff, and I hope people will check out the website, senatorhaywood.com. We'll make sure we get links out, and I'll make sure that I sign it because, look, I think what you're doing is important. I think pushing this General Assembly in that direction is important. But, last kind of question I've got for you. In looking at just your experience here in Pennsylvania, I argue the Republican Party is getting further and further to the fringe and to that cult mentality where you have, and maybe you can attest to this or not, that the people who seem to be taking over their party seem to be much more radical, much more extreme, and, well, I would argue soulless almost. I'm curious your thought.
So I would say, at least in the Pennsylvania State Senate, that group does not have a leadership position. And I think in the Pennsylvania State Senate, that cult dynamic isn't really present yet. Now, we could be one election away from that happening. So that's why it's got to be addressed now. I know the chair of the Pennsylvania Republican Party, Val DeGiorgio. I've known him for a while. He is not part of the cult dynamic, at least not yet. And so we have elements of that, but it has not yet taken over the leadership, as far as I can tell, in Pennsylvania. Now, we've got a candidate for governor who is a threat and could take us toward the Trump agenda, and that's Scott Wagner. And so we've got to do everything that we can to make sure he doesn't become a leader. But we have a significant opportunity to do that. Let me just say one other thing regarding the separation of children. There are several facilities in Pennsylvania that have immigrant children that have been separated from their parents. We have to make sure they are inspected. We have to make sure that these children have attorneys, because I believe that attorneys for these children are the best shot at reunification. These children are going to need dedicated advocates that are committed to finding their parents. They can only do that in a zealous attorney working on their behalf. I have no confidence that the national government has the commitment or the resources or the will to make sure reunification happens. But we can get it done. We Americans can help these children, even if our national government does not.
Yeah, it starts with us right here. And like, as I've always said, you want to change the world, you start with your corner of it. And in our corner of it, we make sure that this stuff doesn't happen.
That's right. And we can get it done in Pennsylvania. There's a number of immigration lawyers now already organized to represent these children. We got to do everything we can to support these lawyers and make sure that the state government gets an opportunity to inspect these facilities. We're on the move to get that done.
Good stuff. Senator Haywood, I appreciate the time. I'd love you to come back and keep us informed of how this is going and what we can do to help move that along. Right now, everyone go to senatorhaywood.com. Make sure that you sign up the petition and have the voice heard. Senator, I appreciate the time.
Thanks. A long day today, but glad to be on.
Keep up the fight. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Again, you know, this is one of those things where you just go, it's amazing. Here we are in Pennsylvania. We've got kids here in Pennsylvania from the border already. It's maddening and angering and frustrating and all of that all combined. It just is what it is. And I think, at least I hope we're better than this. Time will tell. We will see how this plays out. We will see where this goes. But hopefully we're better than what's happened. Just kind of a thought. I'm, you know, there are days where you just go, I'm just outside of my mind with how angering this week has been and how frustrating this week has been. You know, as the father of three kids, you know, there's been a lot of soul searching this week. And a lot of the people that have emailed me, and you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. A lot of the people have shared their stories about, you know, how I lost my child at an airport. And one friend who said, look, you know, I had put my kid on a plane to go visit their mother. And, you know, I realized that I could visit, you know, I could spend a little time while they laid over in another city. And I went to go see them. And they wouldn't let me see my child because they had to sign over custody. And he said, it's right that they did that. He understands it. But just that moment of going, what? You're telling me I can't see my child? And having that pit feeling that I just can't imagine. So I can't imagine what these families are going through. As if life hasn't been hard enough for them, that we add this on top of it. It's just sick. It's inhumane. It's cruel. And all of their justifications and all of their backpedaling and all of their, you know, talking out of both sides of their mouth is not going to make it any better. And the First Lady made this no better with her idiotic coach statement. I don't care. I don't care if it meant nothing or if it meant everything. The reality is the message sent is the message that was received. And again, I think we already know this administration doesn't care about those kids or your kids for that matter. It's infuriating. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, get the app on the smartphone, take the program on the go, wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here on Monday.
been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com.